separation or the departing of Jacob and his family away from Laban. And we can see that throughout the course of this discussion that takes place and the events that take place in Genesis 31, that there has been bitterness and resentment that has been growing between them. And it's probably due to a lack of communication between the families, because they wouldn't have been like everyone going to the same house at night to sleep. There would have been some separation. And really, the souring of Laban's attitude, as we begin to see it for the first time here, begins with Laban's sons. They are the ones who begin to complain. Jacob is taking everything from us. That's what they're saying. And so, as they're sharing this with Laban, their father, then, that probably set in motion the gears, which just ends with the events that take place in chapter 31. And of course, the Lord confirms that Jacob has come to his time when he should leave. In verse 3, it says, "Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you." So we have 20 years that has passed where Jacob has been with Laban. Laban's sons grumble. The Lord warns Jacob to leave, and Jacob prepares his wives for their departure. Now, at first reading, you would think, well, that's normal. You would expect that Jacob would have to talk to his wives in order to prepare them for leaving their father, right? I mean, they've been living there for 20 years, and with Jacob, and then, of course, they've lived there all their lives. And so, some preparation you would think has to go into preparing them to leave. And this is possible, but you can tell from their answer that they're holding no, favorable attitude towards their father Laban. They accuse him of stealing everything from them too, and that's just how it goes. So Laban's accusing Jacob of stealing all of his flocks, and really the heart of the chapter is the flocks. That's kind of the issue at hand here. And Laban, of course, will mention his daughters as well. But anyway, they are showing no concern for their father, nothing that would want them to stay there or keep them there. They're ready to go as well, accusing Laban of having robbed them. So Jacob is accusing Laban, and the daughters are accusing Laban. And really, this is not the best way to facilitate or to build the relationships between them. As a matter of fact, this is just kind of contributing to the dysfunction there and the animosity between them. So rather than building it up, they're talking behind Laban's back and really putting him down. And really, we're apt to do that in our own lives. When we're unhappy with somebody, do we go to that person? Well, not usually. We'll usually start grumbling with somebody else first. And so we're just kind of spreading the discontentment behind that person's back. And if you really think about it, look at verse 3 again. The Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. All Jacob had to say to everybody was, hey, look, the Lord is leading me or telling me that I should go back home. Now, would that have been an excuse that would have been received by them? Well, what could they say against that, right? They have all acknowledged God in some way, whether in the birth of the children or Laban is acknowledging God in Jacob's presence and his blessing. And so everybody has acknowledged God. And so rather than going behind Laban and festering the animosity there, he could have just outright said, look, I've been here 20 years and the Lord is telling me that it's time for me to take my family and to go home. And Laban may have been receptive of this, because after they bicker and they go back and forth, it's Laban who initiates the peace between them. Okay, let us make a covenant now, you and I will be and it will be a witness between you and me. And so they go into the covenant making process there, and they set that up. But Laban is the one who initiates that. And he says several times, these are my daughters, and what am I going to do to them? These are my grandchildren. What am I going to do to them? I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not going to do anything against you. Although Jacob does make the comment about fearing Laban in his desire to leave. He expresses some fear that he left and Laban wouldn't have liked that and done something else to them. And so they leave secretly. Now, like I said a moment ago, it wasn't that they all lived in the house. How many days did it say? I think it said how many days? 7 days? 7 days before he even discovered that they were gone. And this wouldn't have been uncommon, so they would have lived in the same general area, but not under the same roof. So Jacob would have had his family in close proximity, but not close enough where, they necessarily would look out the window and see each other all the time. So he leaves, and some time passes, a few days, and it takes 7 days to overtake him. In verse 23 it says, oh, Laban was told on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled. So, yeah, that's what I thought. So after 3 days, he discovers that they had gone, and it takes them 7 days to catch up to him. So that's kind of the situation. They leave secretly, which just adds fuel to the flame, right? Because Laban, when he finds out they're all gone, what do you mean they're all gone? They're not here. Are you sure? I can just see him saying this, and then getting his men together, and the posse rides after the culprits there. So of course Laban overtakes them, and it doesn't come to blows, because basically God warns Laban in a dream not to treat Jacob in an unfriendly or in an unrighteous manner. So it doesn't come to blows, but there's a lot of heated discussion, and they go back and forth there. Now they make this covenant in Mizpah at the end. And a few years ago, there was this this kind of jewelry that was popular. It was in the shape of a circle, and they cut it in half in a kind of a jagged line. And so you would have two friends. They would buy this piece of jewelry, and one of them would take half of the piece of jewelry, and the other friend would take the other half of the jewelry. Has anybody ever seen this before or heard of it? It was called, oh, really? All half? Oh, okay. Do they still do this kind of thing? They do? All right, the Mizpah. It's supposed to be between best friends, but really the Mizpah here is kind of a, I don't trust you, so you take this, and may the Lord watch over you, and you don't trust me, I know that, and so I'm taking the other half, and may the Lord watch over me, that neither of us break this covenant. So even though we kind of use it in a best friend type of capacity, the context here, it's really in a I don't trust you kind of capacity. So may the Lord watch over you and make sure that you don't deal treacherously behind my back. So that's the heart of Genesis 31. Anybody have any questions about anything that takes place here, or any comments? Daniel and Jim?
Rehearsing the flocks, is that just showing how God brought about this?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Last week we were talking about we weren't sure exactly what methodology Jacob was using in order to be successful at his breeding practices. But here I thought I had written this down, but I did. Okay, anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but that's okay. So we see that God was the one who was at work taking all of Laban's wealth from him, whatever Jacob ended up with. God was kind of working behind the scenes. And we also see, it says in verse 11, that the angel of God spoke to Jacob in a dream and told him which ones to breed. So, God was kind of giving Jacob insight into how to breed the flocks so that it turned out in his favor. So there was no hint of that in chapter 30, but we do see reference to this in chapter 31. And like I said, the whole issue in the argument here, well, not everything, but the primary issue is with respect to the flocks. And this would have been like their money, so they're accusing Jacob of taking all their wealth because he took all of their flocks. And so that's kind of the banter there is with, their wealth and their prosperity. There's one other thing I didn't mention is that as they're getting ready to leave, Rachel steals the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob pronounces a pretty serious curse. If you find anything that I've stolen from you among anybody here, that person's going to die. And that's a pretty serious curse right there. And I don't know if there's any connection here, because it's going to be years later, but Rachel's going to be the first one of the family to die. So I don't know if there's a connection there. My only hesitation is that it's a little too far apart, and they really don't make that connection. But maybe it's connected, maybe it's not. I don't know. But anyway, Rachel takes these idols from their father. One person that I read suggested that Rachel took this because she was upset that her father had taken all of her money, which is the comment here. And so to get back at him, she takes his gods, maybe for one of two reasons. First, that to possess the household gods was really that God is, these gods are going to prosper me and, cause me to succeed. So she might have thought that and thus taken the idols herself for that reason. Or second, maybe they had some intrinsic value that she might have been able to sell them or get rid of them in some way and thus earn some money that way. Again, there's no suggestion that that's why she took them, but that's just something that somebody said that may be possible. But anyway, she steals the idols. It might have just been in order to spite her father. And she sits on them and claims it was the time of the month. And the fact that Laban doesn't ask her to move, that he takes her at her word, shows that he probably has a soft spot for his daughter there. And the thought that she was the one who took the idols probably didn't cross his mind. Although he was in her tent looking, but he didn't look too closely and he didn't press her for, to move and, to check everywhere in the tent. So that might show, Laban's heart, his sensitivity to his daughter Rachel in particular. And maybe that's kind of a reflection back at, well, I don't want to give Rachel in marriage before I give Leah in marriage, so I'm going to trick Jacob and give him Leah first and keep Rachel a little bit longer, although it was only 7 days. But anyway. All right, did I answer your question, Daniel? Okay. Jim, did you have a comment or question?
I was just going to say that if you look at the story so far, through chapter 31, you could really go and say that a bad thing, that what he's going through has been bad on Jacob.
Yeah.
It's turned out for good, just like it's supposed to be, if you believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the summary of what's really happening.
Yeah.
The way you're supposed to look at it anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. At the end of chapter 30, we read, "Thus the man, Jacob, became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys." And you can't help and read that and see God and believe that God was behind it. I mean, he succeeded and he prospered. It was because God was with him. It surely wasn't because he deserved it. And we've already talked about this, that Jacob's not showing himself to be very godly here at all. And there's a lot of trickery and deception that's going on, and just it's just the bad blood just kind of builds up over all of this time, and it's a long time, and it's unfortunate. People do harbor bitterness and resentment for long periods of time, and they say time heals, right? Well, time heals only if certain things are working properly. If those things aren't working properly, well, you can put as much time as you want behind it, and it's not going to heal anything. It can make it worse. And people can go to their graves just more angry at the end than they were at the beginning. So anyway, I think you're right. And that brings me to the next section here. We finally see, I think, God mentioned more and kind of responsible or behind more of the events that have taken place. So let me just kind of run through this list real quick. First of all, we've already seen in verse 3 that the Lord is the one who tells Jacob to return to the promised land. If you remember way back when Jacob left, he was at Bethel and he saw the ladder, right? The ladder. And God told him at that time that he would prosper him and keep him safe and bring him back to the land. And so now we're beginning to see those promises at Bethel fulfilled. here. And it is the Lord who tells Jacob to return back. In verses 7 and verse 42, Jacob saw the Lord protecting him. So he says in these two places, he says in verse 7, just to give you one of those examples, your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. And here it is, God did not allow him to hurt me. And so Jacob is acknowledging that God is the one who has been protecting him all of this time from Laban's ploys. We see that the Lord was the one who worked to transfer Laban's wealth to Jacob. So this is verses 8 and 9 and verse 16. So God was behind it. Verse 16 says, for all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. That's the response of his wives there. So God is acknowledged as having transferred, and legitimately so, right? I mean, there's trickery there, but Jacob didn't steal the flocks. They had come to an agreement, and it just kind of turned out in Jacob's favor every time. Even, and this is how, the impression that I get, how it went. So Jacob says, okay, Jacob and Laban agree. All the spotted ones are going to be mine. So the flocks start multiplying. And they all turn up spotted. And Laban sees this. And it's like he says, now wait a minute. How is this happening? The spotted aren't yours anymore. I'm going to take all the spotted from now on, and you take all the striped ones. So the flocks start breeding again, and this time they all start coming up striped instead of spotted. And Laban sees what's happening. He says, wait a minute. How could this be? I'm taking the striped and the spotted. You get all the white ones, Jacob. So the flocks start breeding again, and this time they're all coming up white. And so this is how it's going here. And Laban is flabbergasted, and Jacob is just multiplying there and being blessed. And so he's not really stealing from them, although Laban is probably thinking, what kind of witchcraft is this guy doing behind the scenes in order to cause this to work out like that? This is the animosity. It just continues to breed and fester the animosity between them, because it just doesn't seem right, in Laban's eyes. And Jacob here has got this big smile on his face, because no matter what he does, it's just working out good for him, and it's just. So anyway, the Lord was the one who was at work transferring Laban's wealth to Jacob. Verses 10 through 12, it seems that the Lord was behind the breeding practices of Jacob. I already mentioned that. Verse 13, the Lord tells Jacob again to return to the promised land. And then verses 24 and 29, God appeared to Laban and warned him to treat Jacob right. So he appears once, and then Jacob refers to it once in verse 29. And so we see the Lord just kind of, what had been behind the scenes and unmentioned is now kind of being brought out as this episode just kind of comes to a climax here after he leaves. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's go on to our prayer request.